Welcome, I'm Suzanne Phillips. Thanks for joining me again on Psych Up Live. Maya Angelou tells us that there's no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. Our show today is going to bring you up close and personal to the stories of men who have struggled, many for half a lifetime, daring to find themselves, own, and tell their stories. The power of this theme will be illuminated by our guest, Vinnie Kinsella, a professional storyteller and reader, performer, and the editor of a powerful book, Fashionably Late, Gay, Bi, and Trans Men Who Came Out Late in Life. Your story may be very different. If you've ever wondered if you should go public with your story, you will want to hear our guest, Vinnie Kinsella. Vinnie Kinsella's life revolves around stories. Over the years, he has been a featured storyteller and reader at live shows, including The Mystery Box, Seven Deadly Sins, and Valid. As the owner of Paper Chain Book Publishing Services, which provides editing, book design, and publication management services for independent authors and publishers, he is passionate about helping writers share their stories with the world. Vinnie is a popular presenter at writing and publishing workshops, both big and small, throughout the Pacific Northwest. He lives in the famously, this is his description, weird city of Portland, Oregon, with his husband and their pampered and I'm sure adorable dog, Vinnie Kinsella. It is my privilege to welcome you to Psych Up Live.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Vinny, what brings you to storytelling and your gift of helping others share their story?
Yeah, I think about that because story has been a part of my life, my whole life. I mean, the fact of the matter is everyone's a storyteller. Just, not everybody necessarily works on the craft of storytelling. But
Right.
I think for me, growing up, I was always had my nose in a book growing up. And stories, reading other people's stories and hearing other people's stories always was a way to help me process some of my own life and process the world around me. And so I don't know at what point that kind of transferred over to me wanting to tell stories. I mean, I remember when I got into books specifically. It's sort of a second grade, we as a class did a project where everybody got to write and illustrate a page for a picture book, and then we made it into a book. And then, that was my first, time publishing a book.
Right.
And, I don't remember anything else about second grade, but I remember making a book. And I feel like that experience, embedded something in me that, it stayed with me to this day. And I think just the idea that we could tell a story and it could be something other people like or other people respond to, and kind of the evolution from there, toward writing and then toward publishing. Um, and I'm a strong believer that stories can change lives. And I think it's important that everyone tell their own stories. They hear the quote, if you don't tell your own story, someone will tell it for you.
Mhm.
And that's something that I live by. And so, I love telling my stories, but I also really love giving space for other people to tell their stories and also, maybe helping them with, crafting their story and putting it out into the world. So, yeah, that's sort
Okay.
of the longer answer, I guess.
Okay, it's a great answer. So then let me ask you then. You've been a storyteller, but it took a while. And what was it that made you decide to do a book about people whose coming out was fashionably late? What did it
Uh,
mean for you? What was the impetus for this?
um, well, there were a few things that went into that. Part of it was when I started coming out, I was looking for stories because, like I said, that's how my MO, and I found lots of great resources on coming out, but they were almost always geared toward younger people. You might find a chapter about coming out when you're an adult, and they usually mean people who are 25 in that. And I just remember, you know, uh, after I came out and I started finding people who came out, who like me came out when they were, definitely, fully defined adults, that, sharing that unique experience was wonderful. And it was sort of one of those moments where, gosh, I wish there was a book that could speak to this. I wish somebody had done that. And it was just almost like one of those moments where I'm like, wait, I work in book public, I make books for a living.
Right.
Who I can't sit around and wait for somebody else to make this book happen. So it was definitely a moment of I have the skills, so why am I not using them?
Uh-huh. And did you go looking for authors? Did they find you? How did it happen?
Um, Primarily, I put out submission calls through some of the writers organizations and so yeah, I did actively, sort of look for authors. There were a few people that I in the book that I knew and solicited stories from, but for the most part, it was I put out a call for submissions, not knowing if anyone would even have a story to share. And Was pleasantly surprised with what I got. Quite a wide variety of people and a wide variety of backgrounds, but also having that commonality of knowing what it's like to come out at a time in life where, you've been defined one way for so long and you're
Mm-hmm.
having to redefine yourself.
Right. It's interesting that you took a number of steps that made it very clear that many people were struggling with the same journey and not able to step out. And we're going to get to your chapter and some of your authors, but I wanted people to know about what was the impetus for starting the Late Bloomers Club, Vinny? What is
Um,
that?
Yeah, so the Late Bloomers Club, still going strong here in Portland. I started it because of a breakup, actually. I had been dating a guy for a while after I came out, who also came out around the same age and time that I did, and that was a connection point, because we were able to kind of navigate the newness of being part of the queer community and all of the awkwardness of, our peers being people that we would talk to, and they had been out since they were 19 or 20, and so they would be talking about these things with experience and talk to us, and we'd be sitting there going, I don't know what they're even talking about. I've not had that experience, and that was a good bonding point. And then when that relationship ended, I found myself going, I miss that aspect. And I
Okay.
know there are others. So I just, I started as I just want to try and get together with people. So I put a thing on Meetup and it was like, hey, if somebody came out late and you want to meet and have, a little dinner. And I was surprised how many people responded. And then it just immediately turned into an ongoing thing. Um, that again, I thought maybe if I could find three or four other people, I had no idea how many people were out there.
Well, it's fabulous the way you wrote it. And as I mentioned before we started, as a group person, we say you often find self in other,
Yeah,
and you also accept self in other. Because how could you judge this man who's saying he's 50 years old and waited and he finally feels he can breathe because he can own his sexual identity? That's got to be a gift to the other men in the group.
it is.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right, guys. I mean, a big part of what made the group work wasn't, people would ask me, what are the secrets to making the group what it did? And I said, all I really did was put my hand up and say, I'm this kind of person. And if you are this kind of person and want to connect, come say hi, because that's really the power of the group is somebody would walk into this room for the first time and feeling very alone in what they've gone through, and then they would just be greeted with a room full of people who understood. And everyone has different paths, but to me that, like, there's no real secret other than openness
Yeah,
to
yeah.
make that work.
But I bet for many it was like coming home, like, wow, these
Mhm.
people get me. I'm not alone in this journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And they stay in each other's lives. And we had a couple meet and fall in love, and they're out living their lives now. And so, yeah, it was just a beautiful thing to watch unfold right in front of me, and in unexpected ways.
What was interesting to me is that you were the youngest member. You
I
started it, and you were the youngest member.
Yeah, that was a joke. That was kind of a running joke when I started it because, and I think I talk about this a little bit in the introduction about, what does it mean to be coming out later in life? And I think there is some generational component to that because, for a baby boomer in particular, coming out, I think the average age for a baby boomer coming out would have been like 35 to 40 at one point. And so, they think of coming out as late as 50s and 60s. And, I'm on the very tail end of Gen X, a little younger. You
Yeah,
go down to like Gen Z now, and they're like, I never had to come out. I just was,
yeah,
sometimes. And
yeah.
so, and so,
Different world.
but it was a bit funny for me to start this group and have most of the people be generally 10 to 15 years older than me coming in and that was kind of a joke that we had. Like, I started this group for late bloomers, and I'm the youngest one.
Now, one of the things you asked, which was so interesting in the group, is um, when did you come out? And I think one man says, which time do you mean?
Yeah.
Because, okay, talk a little bit about that.
Um, yeah. So I think pre pre coming out, we have this concept that coming out is an event, a one-time event that happens in your life. And I remember when I was in that process, people kept saying things to me like, well, you're always going to be coming out, or you're always going, you're always going to be coming out. And I didn't get it. I was like, what, no, I'm choosing to tell the people in my life that, hey, I'm gay. This is who I am. I'm out. It's a thing that I do. And you realize that it's not a one-time event. It starts usually with a one-time event, but it becomes part of your life, and it's a lifestyle. And every time I go into a new social group or am involved in something new, I'm given the chance once again to decide, do I want to come out in this group? Do I want to be out in this group? And then it differs from also different things. Like, just publishing this book was to me a different kind of coming out because I was out to everybody in my life. And then all of a sudden, as I was publishing the book, I remember getting a little bit nervous. I'm like, oh, this is different. I'm coming out to the world by
To the world, yeah.
publishing a book. And so, yeah, I think that for me, it was, for some people, it is, their first coming out might have been, oh, I told my sister when I was, 17 years old, and then didn't do anything again for another 20
Right,
years. But
right.
but to me, the realization that, we're always coming out, and it is a life, and it is a consistent choice that we make. It's not just, I stepped out of the closet, it's choosing to live outside the closet. And so,
Mm.
and I think that again, when you're on the other side, you don't think of it that way because all you think is, I got to get past this initial event. And yeah, that's sort of where that concept is, where it took
Well,
me out.
the other thing that I think that maybe I would have missed, and maybe others in terms of people coming out, is like you were very much a part of a church community.
Hmm.
Um, and so no matter how hard you tried, being part of that church community was incompatible with you coming out. So there's loss involved with coming out. If you're coming out of a big family that
Hmm.
suddenly rejects you because you came out, that's the loss of very important people. Much as I think the loss of the church community, when people are religious and they're part of it, is a very big loss. So,
Yeah.
how did you negotiate that with yourself in terms of your story?
Oh, wow. You know, um, it's funny because going back to what I said about we all tell ourselves stories, I think part of it is at least in my community, growing up in the evangelical world, we are told this is the story of how life is. And I'm not necessarily just talking about, the creation story or whatever, but, this is the way God intended for humans to work. This is the way it is. And we tell ourselves these stories so much that um, sometimes when you are telling yourself a story, you can run into collision with reality if you're believing a story that doesn't line up. And you have a couple of options when that happens. One is to reject the reality. Two is try and find a weird way to make it work,
Right.
or just or go, oh, this reality doesn't line up with the story I'm telling. I gotta start telling a different story. And so it's, for me, it was a lot of different things coming into play. And I remember, I don't know if I talk about this much in the book, the event that particularly kind of flipped the switch for me. I was 30 and no surprise, I was writing the church newsletter, writing, and there was a man who started coming to our church with a wife and three kids, and they were very vocal, sharing their testimony that he was once gay and now he's married and has kids. And I remember thinking, I really need to talk to this person because he's done the thing that I've been trying to do for so long.
Mm,
He knows the secret. And as I was talking to him, I finally got to the end of that conversation, and I just said, "I want to know the truth, though. Do you still find yourself attracted to men?" And he said, "I'm not gonna lie to you. Yeah, I do, but I just choose not to act on that attraction." And he said, "That's pretty much the way it is for most people who are, ex-gay. It's not that the feelings go away; it's that you just choose not to act on them." And that deflated me
mm,
because, I realized I thought that, this community was promising I could change and I could be something different. And then the examples that were being held up as people who had changed were just telling me, no, I haven't really changed on the inside. I've just modified my behavior. And that deflated me. And that was part of my breaking point and part of that. And then but it took me another 2 years really to come out because I had invested so much in relationships and friendships. And I knew from watching other people leave the church for this very reason that coming out meant I would lose most everyone in my world. And I had to get to a place where I was willing to risk that. And that was, when people would come to the group and they were on that cusp of, I'm afraid to come out because I don't know, will I lose my wife? Will I lose my kid? Will I lose my whatever? My question for them was always, does what feels worse to you? Living your life and keeping that thing, or being honest to yourself, even though you might lose that thing? And if you could answer positive to the second, then you're ready.
uh-huh, uh-huh. Well, it's a loss of authenticity,
Yeah,
but it's a very big dilemma. Yeah, we have to appreciate what a big dilemma it is. Now, do I have it right? Were you ever married at any point, Vinny?
it
No.
was not.
Okay.
No,
No.
I
Okay. Okay. You
not for
have.
lack of trying.
Okay. Well, some of your authors were.
Hmm.
And it's interesting. Um, I think, well, let's just talk about some of your authors. It's great that they volunteered to share their stories. One which really sort of tugged at my heart was Crossing Nueces by David Mesham. And
Hmm.
he's 66 as he writes for
Yeah,
you in the book. And he struggles so much with he didn't want to be gay. The boys in school called him girl. You could see the pain that is sometimes involved when the child knows something's different and he's not like the other boys, but to have to suffer so much is so painful.
yeah.
And then finally, as an adult, he tells his parents that he's gay.
Hmm.
And his mother says, doesn't matter, you're our David, but his father cannot and never does accept. So, it's a hard, it's a rough story when your parent can't accept who you are.
Yeah. And that's unfortunately all too common. Even still, I mean, I know that as a culturally, we've made a lot of strides and stuff, but yeah, it's very unfortunately too common, especially for older generations, that parents don't want to let go of the stories they've been told about how how life is, and the stories they've been told of what those means, especially men, holding on to the narrative of we present of what masculinity is. And it's sad to me, when you see a parent be more invested in their narrative and their belief than in the actual person. in
Got it.
front of them. Um,
Absolutely, yes.
and it is unfortunately all too common, and it is painful. And I think, when I talk with people who don't have the experience because they're not gay or they're not trans or they're queer of any type, I don't think sometimes, I don't think most people are presented with um, a choice that they know will lead them to possibly losing family, possibly losing loved ones. And it's a dilemma. I wish nobody had to, to deal with for whatever reason. But it's unfortunate. It is unfortunate. It's painful. But I wanted to make sure that that story and stories like that were shown because I wanted to show the messiness of coming out. It's not just a simple this happened and everything changed. It's complicated, it's messy, and it can also lead to pain.
Yeah, yes. Well, a number of your authors did marry in an
Mhm.
attempt to get it right or because it was literally too dangerous. In the story, Trying Marriage as a Way to Be Okay by Andrew Huerto, um, he calls it a case study of a juto, which is a gay single man in Spanish. And he had cousins who were killed for being gay. One was a hairdresser, one was a drug addict. I mean, a lot of painful stereotypes he was surrounded by.
Mhm.
So he chooses to marry.
Yeah.
And as you describe it, his wife has an affair, the marriage ends. Um, and his long story is that he marries a gay man, is happy, feels badly about the past, but the past, as he describes it, is a journey, good and bad, that if we can just keep going, gets us where we need to be. As he describes himself, a resiliently happy homosexual man. But so here's a kid who's leaning toward homosexuality and watching the people around him and his family be battered for it, killed for it. So it makes sense that he would marry and say, "This guy got to try to be straight."
Yep.
Um, but it's a rough story in that one. That one it really touched me because I thought this poor young guy in his 20s thought, let me get married. Maybe I can work this out. Um, and you, if anyone, knows the probably deals people make with themselves. So I'll marry, it'll be all right. We'll switch churches, whatever it happens to be.
Mhm.
Um, we're going to take a break, but when we come back, I want our listeners to know we have more examples of the power of coming out and embracing the authentic self and the journey. It's no easy journey. You've been listening to Psych Up Live. We are with our guest, Vinnie Kinsella. His book is Fashionably Late. Okay, so stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Psych Up Live. We're here with Vinnie Kinsella, his powerful book, Fashionably Late, Gay, Bi, and Trans Men Who Come Out Late in Life. He's the owner of Paper Chain Book Publishing Services for independent authors and publishers. And Vinnie and I were just talking about the group. We had just been mentioning a man who tried everything. He tried to marry. He was hoping maybe that would work. It didn't work for him. In the end, he leaves that marriage. But I asked Vinnie if in the late bloomers group, if there are a number of men, half, well, I don't know, who actually do use marriage as an attempt to get it right, to be straight, to not have to deal with this complicated life.
Yeah, and the answer is yeah. I mean, I never did an actual tally, but it was definitely the majority of people coming in were people who had been married to, men who had been married to a woman, or still married at the time. But yeah, it was a very, very common experience in that group. For that to be part of the story, part of their story is, having a wife, maybe having kids, maybe even having one or two failed
Yeah.
marriages along the way.
Well, we want so much to fit in. We want to please parents. We want to be okay. So it makes sense to me psychologically that people would give it a try. Then the question I asked Vinny, because one of the authors in his book said, I'm coming out and I'm going to tell my daughter, my 5-year-old daughter, because I owe it to her to be authentic and not to lie. And so then I was asking Vinny, what is the impact on the children? What came out in the group in terms of children?
Yeah, and it's varied. Definitely there were definitely many positives. A parent comes out to a child, and then the child, starts to see that parent become themselves and live a happier life, and they're like, my dad is a much happier person and a much more pleasant person to be around and talk about. And so sometimes it does result in stronger relationships, but I've also seen the opposite, especially from those who their whole family was embedded in a deeply in religion. A lot of times it feels like betrayal. It feels like, you've lied to me. You've been telling me, you've been preaching to me all these years about the right way to live and the right way to live and all this stuff, and now suddenly you are doing the things you told me and being the things you told me not to be, and it can feel like a betrayal, and so it can lead to estrangement. And I've seen that wide variety, and I wish I could tell somebody who's, worrying about coming up to their kid that it's gonna be great, but I can't make that promise. But I
Uh,
also saw some interesting things. Like there were times when one of the members of the group would come out to a kid, and that would free the kid up to come out
mm,
in return. And I
uh-huh.
also saw it work the opposite way sometimes. We had men come to the group after one of their children came out to the family, and they realized that, they also had to come out. And so, in some ways, going through the coming out process in parallel with their own child is an interesting one.
Very interesting.
But yeah, and I think that's I think in my experience and what I've seen, coming out to a child seems like one of the hardest things for people, because such a unique relationship. And um, you know if you lose a marriage, that obviously that's going to hurt,
Mm.
but you can go on in life and find another partner, suits, but can't replace your kid.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what you're implying is important, whether we're talking divorce for other kinds of reasons or because a parent just knows they can't live
Yeah.
in a life that's not authentic. And it's the way things are presented to children, and it's how connected you remain with them. And
Mhm.
it's expecting that at 15, they're not going to be so chummy about it when people start to hear your dad is gay. So then they may have a very different feeling. And so we're in a different
Yeah,
territory at that point. Um,
exactly.
I wanted to ask you, I think there's a mention in the book of a woman who uh, she wants to transition as a man, but in her transition as a man, she feels she's going to be a gay man. Now, you didn't have many examples of women in the book, but what do you think that women struggle the way men do with waiting till they're older, first trying to marry, trying to get it the conventional way? From your experience, Vinny.
I mean, there's a couple of things. Obviously, when we're talking about trans men, that's a different story
Yes,
than somebody coming out as lesbian or bi.
right.
I do know. Uh, I know there is another book that's focused on women. I wish I could remember the name. I believe it's called Dear Jane. But the
Okay,
authors of that book actually reached out to me one time, and we connected because they were kind of happy to see a counterpoint to theirs, and it's a similar
nice.
story book. But yeah, I think um there's a whole different set of pressures on women in our society, so I can't speak to the influences, but there are definitely women who come out later in life for lots of reasons. A lot of times it's, the same thing. I grew up in a community where I was told I needed to be a good wife and a mother, and that's the role I had to play. Sometimes it's an awakening, later in life. So yeah, I mean, I think for me, I think that there's a lot of commonality regardless of your gender, in the coming out process.
How did your family respond?
That's it. Fine. I mean, I mean, it wasn't easy for a lot of them. I came out, so I'm the youngest of four, and there's a big age gap between me and the older three. So they were all in junior high when I was born. So that kind of gives
Oh,
you an
wow.
idea. When it came out to my sisters first, and one of them was kind of like, and they were on board. And then I would dreaded my parents always dreaded because I knew how they were. I knew they grew up. My dad had the funniest response. He just kind of took it in stride. He says, "Well, you can't change it. That's who you are. I mean, I'm blind in one eye. That's who I am." And like, sure, Dad. Like,
You
I'm
can't make
glad
it
you
up,
understand.
Vinny.
The fact that you understand it's something I can't change about myself is enough for me at the time. My mom kind of surprised me. My mom was the one who grew up, who raised me in church in the evangelical one, and she had a lot of questions, she had a lot of fears. But she kind of surprised me with I don't know if I could go so far as to say she was supportive, but she was at least attempting. And one of the things that surprised me. I sing with the Portland Gay Men's Chorus, and the year I joined, my mom actually said, "Oh, I want to come to your show," and I was like, "You do realize it's a show with like 100 gay men's, like this is like way out of your comfort zone." And she came because she wanted to see her son perform because she
Nice.
loved seeing her son perform when he was in high school, and she wanted to see it again. So yeah, for the most, I didn't get any rejection from my family.
Yes, they found a
I
way.
don't know that I got fully embraced
Right.
by all of them. So, but I got in some ways better than I thought I would get.
Well, we might say they did their best.
Yeah.
They did the best they could. It wasn't full, but it definitely, your mother said, I'm still your mother. I want to see my kid perform. I
Yeah.
don't care where it is. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Good. But what prompted you to tell them? Was it that it was boiling up in you or?
I think what got me past the hump of needing to tell my family because um was I didn't want I kind of started to dip my toe into dating before that, and I realized I didn't want to be the person in a relationship who hadn't come out to the family. I didn't want to be in a relationship and have that experience of like, okay, we can date, but my family can't know about you. You can't be part of my family, which does happen. And I thought, and that was kind of what put me over the edge is I'd rather take care of this before I get into a relationship because I don't want to, drag that in and that because I was less concerned, and my family was pretty dysfunctional and I wasn't so concerned about like losing their support because I never really felt fully supported by my family in general. But
Mhm.
yeah, it was the realization that I didn't want to be in a relationship and have to keep that relationship from my family or keep the person I'm with from my
Right,
family.
right. There's one of your authors describes a situation where he waits and waits and waits and waits, and then he makes the call to his mother. He says, I have to tell you something that I've been holding in a long time. And she says, that you're gay?
Mhm.
And he's sort of shocked. And I walked away from that page thinking, you knew he was gay and you didn't let him know you knew, and he had to hold it as a secret. So that then brought me to a memory that happened. I've been a psychologist a very long time. A young, how old was the boy? He's about 14, and he wanted to meet with his father in my office. And um, the father, yeah, I think someone in the family knew me from being my patient at some point, and told his dad, I want you to know that I'm gay. And the dad, they were sitting at opposite ends, Vinny, of a couch. And the father said, I know that you're gay. And they both moved together into the middle of the couch. And it was very precious, but I thought, oh, thank God this kid wanted to do this because when I read, reminded me when I
Mhm.
read the story, I thought, how do you wait a life and not tell your child you know and that it's okay? Now I can't judge that person, but it's my wish that people could do that, you know?
Yeah, I think, again, that's another, there's so many factors in that. And I mean, I had similar experience with people that I knew who were kind of like, well, no, duh. And I'm like, well, you didn't say anything. And, there's a lot of cultural reasons for that. There's, a lot, it's not my business to tell. It's not, that. But I do, when I talk with people who suspect that they have a family member who might be in the closet and
Hmm.
do that, I do talk about the importance of saying, vocalizing, not necessarily, I think you're gay, but, being open with your conversation about support for gay people, or, you have to send those signals to say, I'm a safe person, I'm a trusting person, I would love you no matter who, and I
Yes.
know some parents who do that with their young kids. They just kind of say, I'm always going to love you, one of my favorite was one of my clients actually that I work with talked to, she would always say to her kids, I don't care if you marry a man, I don't care if you marry a woman, I don't care if you don't get married, all I care about is that you give me grandkids, That was
Some
just
way or
sort of the
another.
only, but
Yeah.
it was a kind of a funny low pressure way of telling your
Yeah.
kids right off the bat, like,
Yeah.
I'm here for you no matter what. And I think people just don't know how to do that. They get scared. And I think, there's the thing people need to know about closeted people, well, actually just queer people in general, is we're always looking for where we're safe.
Yeah.
I go into a new restaurant or a new coffee shop or something, and I'm looking for clues. Like, do they have a pride flag somewhere? Do they have employees that are clear? Can I see other queer people in here enjoying themselves? And um, you know, uh, it, it y- we're looking for that. So
Yeah.
give them the signs.
Well, Vinny, were you ever in a position where you felt in danger, as a gay man?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, yes, absolutely. I don't generally feel that way. I'm a bigger guy. People don't,
Yeah.
mess with me. But I was on an Uber ride once after I came out, and I was on my way home, and the guy just started spewing off racist crap and all this other stuff. And I remember in that moment going, oh, I need to get out of this car. This person is not safe. And I absolutely cannot let this person know that I'm gay because I would fear for my life the way he's talking. And and that's and like I said, I'm pretty fortunate in that I'm not generally the kind of person who people mess with. I also have
Yes.
other privileges, being a white
Yeah.
man, all that
Yes.
kind of
Yes.
stuff. But yes,
Yes.
and if I've felt it with all that privilege, then I know that people who have less privilege than me have felt it 10 times more.
And we have seen it with someone who's 10 or 12, the bullying that goes
Yeah,
with it
well,
and the
yeah,
suffering that goes with it. It's very, very heartbreaking. But I'm happy to hear that you were able to get out of that situation.
yeah.
So, um, would you say that at this point in our culture, most people who want to find a group, the kind of group that you started, or even groups, let's say for teens or whatever, that they're able to do that in a easier way because of online, or is it still loneliness on the playground and loneliness at home?
Um, wow. I mean, overall, I think there's definitely more resources available than I know there's more resources available than 20 years ago.
Right.
I was thinking back to my days in high school and at a graduating class of 360 something kids, and I couldn't tell you one of them who were out, as opposed to now, high schools having, gay straight alliance programs and clubs and
Yes.
activities. So I know that definitely the resources are more abundant. Access, of course, is the different question. I know I'm a little, I live in Portland, which is kind of known as one of the queerest cities in the country. And so resources here are just like, look and I can find one. But I know that in a lot of rural places, in a lot of places that are away from the big cities, like resources are small, and you might only be able to find something online. You might not be
Okay.
able to find that. But I will say that yes, the resources are definitely more abundant now than they've ever been. But the issue is, of course, access.
Hmm. Okay. As we're almost toward the end, this quote comes from your book. Coming out is not just about me, it's about the collective power of authenticity that gives everyone the freedom to be normal.
Yeah.
Now, I want to invite you, Vinny, to send our folks a take-home message that you would like our folks, our listeners to remember.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a lot of things I can say. I'll specifically speak to people who might be in that situation of, deciding whether or not to come out or coming out. And that's, the most important thing I think you can know is that you're not alone. You're absolutely not alone. You are not the only person who's had to go through this. You're not the only person. Um, even who will understand this. So, um, you know, do what you can to find those people, to find that support that you can, because yeah, you're not alone, and don't let other people tell your story for you.
I love it. I love it. Now, how can people find you, your publishing business? How can people find you, Vinny? What?
I mean, my website is just my name, VinnieKinsella.com, my personal website. That's a good way to find me. Also, and my company, Paper Chain Book Publishing Services. Also, just you Google those two things, you'll find me. Yeah, I'm on Instagram. On some of on the socials. Not very many Vinnie Kinsella, so pretty easy to find.
And I think I got your book through Amazon, so I think your book's right there and easy to order. It's a terrific book. It's really
Yeah, it's
terrific.
available basically any bookstore, and yeah, any bookstore. You can go to your local bookstore and get it ordered. Yeah, it's a very accessible book to find.
Okay, I want to thank you again, and I want to thank my listeners. Please remember you can hear this and any prior show as a podcast on my host site on the podcast app of your iPhone. You'll hear this on iTunes, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Alexa. You could even see Vinny and I on YouTube. Drop me,
Nice.
drop me a comment or a question at suephil@optonline.net. Until next week, please be safe. Thanks and be listening.